Starbucks, between October and December, said something like $3 billion of value is loaded onto these cards. I mean, that's a lot of money.
So much money, in fact, that if Starbucks was a bank, it would rank as the 385th biggest in the country.
So, how did a coffee chain quietly evolve into a global real estate powerhouse? And what exactly is it doing with all that money? Well, to answer these questions, we need to tell the story of how one man had a random idea while eating lunch and drinking a poorly made cup of coffee. Gordon Bowker was a writer and a big fan of coffee and tea. He loved the taste and culture of premium coffee so much that he would drive from Seattle to Vancouver just to satisfy his cravings. But one day, during lunch with Jerry Baldwin and Zev Siegel, something felt off. The coffee didn't slap as hard as it used to, and right there, instead of complaining, he thought to himself, why not just start a coffee company in Seattle? He pitched the idea to Baldwin and Siegel, and they were sold. Without signing any official document, these three ex-college mates set out to build the coffee shop of their dreams. They contributed $1,350 each and secured a $5,000 loan from the bank. From that money, they paid $137 to rent a shop, bought the necessary equipment to begin operation, and struck a deal with Alfred Peet to supply them with fresh roasted coffee beans. And just like that, Starbucks was born. Back then, the company didn't actually sell drinks. Instead, they sold whole coffee beans and occasionally gave out brewed cups of coffee as samples. And it worked. Within the first 9 months, Starbucks generated over $45,000. But after paying Pete for the suppliers and sorting other expenses, there was very little to take home as profit. Nonetheless, they continued to push forward. In 1972, they opened a second store at the University Village shopping center. This new outlet was considered a significant breakthrough in the company's expansion plans. But not long after they settled in, the entire business almost fell apart. Their long-term supplier, Alfred Peet, suddenly announced he would no longer be roasting coffee beans for Starbucks. However, he was kind enough to teach Baldwin his distinctive roasting technique. So, the business continued to expand even in his absence. And naturally, this expansion led to the hiring of some of the most influential workers in the company's history. One of them was Jean Mache, a hard-working lady who went from being an ordinary store employee to becoming a wholesale director. Another one was Jim Reynolds, one of the earliest coffee roasters on the company's payroll, but by far the most influential hire of that era was Howard Schultz. Not just because he was hired as the company's director of operations and marketing in 1982, but because in 1985 he left Starbucks to start his own coffee shop. And just 2 years later, he returned with an audacious attempt to take over the company. Now, contrary to what you might think, the owners were willing to sell to Schultz. As a matter of fact, they believed he was the right man to lead Starbucks forward. But there was one major problem. Schultz didn't have $3.8 million. So, he reached a gentleman's agreement with Jerry Baldwin. If he could raise the money within 60 to 90 days, the company would be his. Sounds simple, right? Well, not exactly. You see, the business circle in Seattle was treacherous at the time, and Schultz learned this the hard way, because a few weeks after that agreement with Baldwin, he was called in for a meeting at Starbucks. And during the discussions, he received some very devastating news. One of the investors he had been speaking to had gone behind his back to make a $3.8 million all-cash offer for Starbucks, and Baldwin was ready to take it. Confused and distraught, Schultz explained the situation to Scott Greenberg, a lawyer friend who worked at a law firm owned by Bill Gates Sr. The learned fellow graciously arranged for Schultz to meet Gates, and that epic encounter changed everything.
I walk in the office, I tell him the whole story, and he says, is everything you told me true? I said, Mr. Gates, 100% the truth. Have you left anything out?
With the help of Bill Gates Sr., Schultz would eventually take over Starbucks. But he didn't just steer the wheels, he reinvented it. This is the story of how an unassuming businessman turned a regional coffee bean business into a multi-million-dollar real estate empire using high-quality data and customer deposits. Although driven by the same passion that spurred Bowker, Siegel, and Baldwin to start Starbucks, Schultz came with some fresh ideas of his own. He reversed the Starbucks operating model, focusing on selling espresso drinks over coffee beans. He also advocated for better employee welfare and promoted the third place concept, which positioned Starbucks as a convenient space where people could relax, work, or network. But more importantly, he adopted an interesting expansion strategy that transformed the company into a household name. While competitors like McDonald's focused on owning land, Starbucks did the opposite. They leased almost every outlet, and that proved to be a game changer. Thanks to this brilliant initiative, Starbucks expanded at twice the rate of McDonald's. But the real advantage wasn't just in the ability to expand quickly. It was the way Starbucks cherry-picked its outlets. You see, when it comes to expansion, Starbucks adopts a data-driven approach. When a potential outlet is identified, experts from the company run it through a set of data to determine if it's ideal. And I am not just talking about basic selection methods like demographics. I mean, those are obviously checked. But Starbucks takes it a notch higher by combining customer behavior data with local foot traffic patterns, shopping habits, average household income, and even cultural preferences. Here's a map of all Starbucks outlets across America, with each dot representing a store. A quick glance shows that most of the stores are placed around coastal areas and major metropolitan markets. But a closer look at the data reflects something far more interesting. Each Starbucks store is deliberately situated around locations with higher household income, larger populations, and more working professionals. The combination of these factors means Starbucks is able to identify the perfect spot to set up shop. Today, each store that carries the Starbucks logo isn't just a regular shop. It is a strong indicator of community growth, economic development, and rising property values. This phenomenon, which is widely known as the Starbucks effect, is well documented in the United States. According to research by Zillow, home values near Starbucks stores in the US increased by 96% between 1997 and 2014. Beyond real estate valuation, the company's revenue has continued to climb through the roof. In 2025 alone, Starbucks generated $37.2 billion, the highest recorded revenue of any restaurant brand in the world. But not all of that money came from selling cups of coffee. That's because while Starbucks fronts as a coffee brand on the outside, it operates as a shadow bank behind the scenes. This whole arrangement started way back in 2009 when the company introduced the Starbucks app. On paper, the idea was straightforward. Customers load money into the app, and every time they make purchases, they earn stars, which can then be traded for free drinks. Now, here's where things get interesting. Starbucks operates a non-cash refund policy, which means all monies deposited to the app cannot be refunded in cash except when required by law. And that's exactly what makes Starbucks a shadow bank. You see, due to the massive adoption of its mobile app and the gamification of the reward program, the company's balance sheet always contains large customer deposits. At some point in 2025, Starbucks had nearly $2 billion in customer deposits on its balance sheet. In comparison, 85% of banks in the US have less than $1 billion in total assets. Yes, you heard that right. Your favorite coffee brand holds more liquid cash than most banks. But here's what makes the Starbucks model even more impressive. Traditional banks have to follow strict guidelines when investing customers' deposits, but Starbucks has no such restrictions. That means every customer's balance on the app is interest-free money that the company can use however it pleases. Now, that brings us to the elephant in the room. During documentation, these deposits are recorded as unearned revenue. But in reality, Starbucks uses them as working capital to fund product innovation, general operations, and the establishment of new outlets. In other words, Starbucks borrows billions of dollars from its customers to expand its business, and yet it doesn't have to pay a single penny in interest. It's literally the smartest and safest business expansion strategy of the 21st century. But the best part of it all is that some customers end up not using their balance, and that ultimately counts as pure profit for the business. According to reports, Starbucks generated over $200 million from unused or unredeemed gift cards and loyalty program rewards in 2024 alone. Now, that's an extraordinary figure by every account. Still, it's not enough to make it the world's most valuable restaurant brand. That title is currently held by McDonald's, and in this next video, we explain why that is the case and how this ultimate king of the fast food business in the US generates its cash flow. Be sure to check it out, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to enjoy more exciting content like this.